sessions that were on stage will be posted, so you can go back and refer to them, share them, give them away as gifts. I want a couple of quick announcements. Those of you, if you checked your email lately, those of you who are going to do the axe throwing, yes, of course, there's a waiver involved. So sign the waiver, and that's going to be sponsored by Facebook. That's our first time doing axe throwing. I think this is going to be interesting. And something that I hope we don't want to mix with it is the brewery tour. Although there's an activity for you, brew tour followed by axe throwing. And Dish is going to be sponsoring that. Those are both all booked up, by the way. So if you are going to cancel, please make room for someone else. So if you're not going to make it, please go see Julie at the front desk and cancel and make room for somebody else. I understand we're going to try to organize some billiards across the way. So those of you who did not make it to sign up for one of the activities, go see Julie again, and she'll tell you about the billiards that we're going to try to set up. Now, hi. Janine Ulrich, who is the Executive Vice President of Direct-to-Consumer for Francis Coppola Winery, or the family Coppola. What is the official brand that's used? Because that's actually part of this story, isn't it?
Yes, it is. So the family Coppola, it started with, actually, you can't say it started with winemaking. It started way before then. But at the crux of it are now 3 wineries, Francis Ford Coppola Winery, Virginia Dare Winery, and a new winery that I will unveil at the end of this because we're sending out a press release today about it. Thank you. It did start, obviously the history starts with the little-known filmmaker who does indie films named Francis Ford Coppola, so part of that history starts there. He started his own film company. He has a literary magazine called Zoetrope All Story. He also has a series of restaurants, a couple that are at our winery facilities, but also one in North Beach in San Francisco that's celebrating its 20th anniversary this year. And then also a collection of resorts that we refer to as hideaways in Central America, Argentina, and Italy.
Now, one of the reasons why we're doing this is because in talking to you, it struck me that this vast collection of diverse things, all under this singular brand, is fascinating and relates to some of the things that a number of the direct-to-consumer brands are going through now. Because as I talked to a number of you over the past few months, one of the things I noticed is a number of brands that are starting to reach beyond that initial product that defined them in the marketplace and are now starting to think about branding in a larger, more encompassing and holistic sense of trying to own more than just a product category, but actually branching out into owning experiences or areas of people's lives. We're going to be talking a little bit about this tomorrow with Elliot from Quip and some of the things they're doing. So that's why I was really fascinated by this example that was built around Francis Coppola's creativity, about that reputation, but then, of course, also about the wine business that he also built a reputation in. So, so tell us about, first of all, let's talk about the direct-to-consumer channel that you have. You have a club, and that's yes. the core of the direct-to-consumer relationship that you have.
Yes, it is. So there are clubs at each of the wineries, and I'm just going to flip through this so I don't miss anybody, because this is the first winery that Francis opened, Inglenook. He originally purchased it when he moved his family to the Napa Valley in 1975. He bought a mansion at the back of the property and some surrounding vineyards, and they started making their own wine. And then he had an opportunity to buy the original chateau that was built in the 1880s. Originally, it was called Inglenook, and in the 60s, it was sold to a couple of corporations, and they became known as box wines, which is kind of unfortunate. So his long vision was to kind of reinstate the brand, which he did there. So they have their own wine club model, but primarily for today's purposes, I'll talk about what I know that's near and dear to my heart is the Francis Ford Coppola Winery Wine Club. So we have 2 main clubs right now, Amanti, which is Italian for lovers, and Amici, which is Italian for friends. And yes, Francis did name both of those clubs. The Amici Club is the entry-level club where you get 4 bottles delivered to you 4 times a year, and that can range anywhere from $75 to $125. And then the Amanti membership, it's 6 bottles of wine, so that shipment will run anywhere from $150 to $215.
And then tell us about the other aspects of membership, too.
Yeah, so this property has a lot of other things going for it besides just making great wine. We have a pool on site. We have restaurants. We have a pavilion where we do outdoor events. During the summer, we do something called Dancing Under the Stars, which I'll probably get into a little bit later. We have 4 regulation-size bocce ball courts. very, very specific also to Francis's standards. And then we also do different events on property as well.
Now, I want to talk a little bit about the nuts and bolts here of communications with these members. Tell us, what's your main point of contact right now?
That's the main one. When people come and visit us in person, it is a big driver for our local club members. We do index pretty heavily locally, and in California, over 52% of our members are in California because they want to take advantage of the perks on property. And then from there, after the face-to-face, we definitely try to get an email from, first and foremost, we try to sign them up for the club, for the membership, or get an email address for them. And then we also have a website where people can submit their email address electronically, and most of the messaging after being on property is email communication. And then we do have 2 dedicated outbound salespeople as part of our e-commerce team, and so they reach out to different folks too to see.
So it's just for the majority of your members, it actually starts with the experience.
And
then becomes an introduction to other products, which that's a fascinating turnaround. It also raises a whole host of questions about what is the growth potential there. When that's your point of entry, that's your customer acquisition point, are huge, expensive resorts with limited room space.
Yeah, our CEO likes to joke that we have more lifeguards than winemakers on our team at the facility because we do have the pool. And that point that you make about visitorship is really, really interesting because at the end of 2017, we had the wildfires in Napa and Sonoma counties, which are devastating in many ways. 13 of my coworkers actually lost their homes in the series of wildfires. But what we didn't anticipate was going to happen was in the aftermath of all of that, the visitorship dropped quite a bit to Napa and Sonoma County. And so we are actually very fortunate. I mean, we probably saw a 15% drop in visitorship, but I can tell you we were one of the lucky ones. There are a lot of other smaller wineries that did not fare as well as we did. And I think part of what allowed us to survive were these different points that we had going on at the winery to keep people coming back.
Tell us about the data collection now. What points... You have multiple points of contact. A lot of them are live contacts rather than digital. Tell us how, at least now, what sort of data you're collecting and where you're collecting it.
We have a lot of different data in a lot of different places, and part of that is the way this winery was built. There were a lot of things that we couldn't just take off the shelf and make work for us. So we have a tasting room, we have e-commerce, we have club, and there are existing systems out for that, but then we had to layer on point of sale for our restaurants, and then a reservation system for our pool and some of our events. So when people are coming on property, again, because we're trying to get them in the club membership, if we get them in, then we're getting a lot of data there, obviously name, last name, address. The good thing about being in a highly regulated industry, such as the wine industry, is in order to sell you wine, we have to get a birth date from you. So that's easy for us to get from people. There's less friction around that point. And then from there, it's just the purchase behavior. We're at an interesting place, though, because our wine family members do engage with us at different points. Right now, the difficulty we're facing is how do we tie that to one customer profile? So I know it's easy for me to see how much somebody is spending just on their shipments and what they buy online and through the tasting room, but then how do I marry that to the time they went and they had dinner at Rustic, or the time that they went over to Belize and stayed at Turtle Inn, or if they subscribe to Xochipal's story. That is the piece that we're trying to navigate right now.
How are you doing it? Where's the project, and what's the chief challenge for the project?
So we're engaging with an agency right now. So they've come on site and they've done some audit of our various data sources and the current KPIs that we're tracking, and then our methodology for doing it, because I'll be the first to tell you it's probably flawed, and so I'm looking for that expertise there. So after that, it's really looking at, because there are so many connection points and so many stakeholders throughout the company. I mean, I'm here representing D2C, but the wholesale, let's be real, that's like the nuts and bolts of our business. That's over 90% of our business. And so they're stakeholders as well. So trying to decide how the website particularly helps all of these different touch points function. So getting in a room together, saying, okay, we know D2C is the most profitable business. We need to encourage membership. So how do we get people to come on property? How do we get people to even find out about us? Our SEO is working great if you already know about us, because if you're searching for Francis Ford Coppola or Claret or Sophia Minis, we're right up there, and you come to us very easily. But if you're searching for award-winning Sonoma County wines, it's hard to find us.
So other than people actually coming on site, what are the chief acquisition channels that have been most successful so far?
one of the things we did last year is we launched a Coppola Rewards program, because what's interesting is because so much of our business is in the wholesale channel, we don't get a lot of visibility into that consumer. They're not on site. We're not interfacing with them. We sell to a distributor who then sells to a retailer who then sells to a customer. So we're losing a lot of that information along the way. So what we wanted to do is create a rewards programs where people can, regardless of where they buy their wine, whether it's from us or from Safeway or Whole Foods or whomever it may be, they can upload a scan of their receipt and then they get points that way. So that's starting to give us a little bit more information about what people are doing, because I'll be honest, I don't expect a club member to sign up for memberships and then buy claret directly from me and wait to get shipped from them, because they can find claret pretty easily. It's well distributed. But what I'm hoping is that we're there wherever the customer wants us. So if they want to pick up a bottle of wine for a dinner party, they don't want to come empty-handed, they can go and get that, pick them up from their house within 20 minutes. Or now, it's exciting, you can have wine delivered to you within an hour with things like Drizzly and Thirsty, so that's really exciting. But if somebody is planning for the wine they want to serve at their wedding, they want to do something a little bit more high-end, or they want to get something that they can't normally get, or, oh, I just want these cans delivered to me on a monthly basis because that sounds cool, but I don't want to run out and have to go out and buy it. That's what we're trying to meet. And
you don't, do you have the expectation that this loyalty program itself is going to be huge, or that you're going to be able to extrapolate from the learnings from that loyalty group and then get a sense of a profile you can build?
Yeah, I think right now for us it's definitely a learning experience, because for so long we have lamented on that problem of not being able to get a full scope of what that customer is doing. Especially out in that wholesale marketplace. So I think right now we're definitely in that learning environment, but then we'll hopefully use that to think of other things, ways to engage people in other areas throughout our company.
So that's honing in on the challenge and the inflection point you're at now. But the thing that you guys have really nailed is the thing that I want to drill into, which is this notion of a broader experience that ties together a diverse, very diverse range of products, from a literary magazine to resorts to wines to a pool. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that larger brand experience that you think you're building and that ties these things together somehow?
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing about having a movie director at your helm is that he treats the company very much like that. So it's about his vision. And Francis and the family, they are a family of storytellers. They've been doing storytelling for generations, and that always creeps its way back into what we're doing. So he's very clear about his vision and what the non-negotiables are. And kind of they're curating what they think some of the best things in life are. So a lot of people wonder, why do you have resorts in Central America? Maybe somebody was wondering that when I mentioned that. And Francis kind of fell into it by accident. When he filmed Apocalypse Now in Vietnam, I was telling somebody this morning, he was supposed to film there for 12 weeks and ended up there for 16 months. So
there's a movie his wife made about that.
Yeah, exactly. Ellie made a great documentary about that, kind of showing all the trials of that piece. But despite the experience of that filmmaking, he still fell in love with that place and the environment. And he was talking to her and saying, "Oh, wouldn't it be great to have get a place in Vietnam where he can come and get away?" And she said, "Maybe you should look for something a little closer to home." So they started looking in Central America, and he found this abandoned lodge called Blancano Lodge, and they bought that in 1981 for a place for the family to go to, a place where Francis could go and he could write, the whole family could come, the kids were young at the time, and then eventually you need to get a caretaker to make sure that place is taken care of, so they bring on caretakers, and then they realized in order to pay for the caretakers, they probably should open it up to rent when they're not there. So in 1993, he ended up opening a resort, and that was Blancano. And that kind of holds true with the other places he opened. Somebody said, "Oh, well, if you have a place in the mountains in Belize, you need to have a place on the ocean." And so Turtle Inn came about. It was built in 2001, and then it was destroyed by Hurricane Iris. And instead of taking it as a sign, the family is just, we're building it, and here it is to this day. And then he was really interested in the Mayan ruins of Tikal, and so that's how he ended up with a place in Guatemala called La Lancha. He was filming Tetro in Argentina, so that's how he ended up with Jardín Escondido in Buenos Aires. And then my particular favorite, Palazzo Margarita, Bernalda is where Francis's family is from. His grandfather, Agostino, grew up there. And so this opportunity came up to refurbish this place that was from the late 1800s there. And so he went for it, and he went all in. And throughout all of these resorts, you know, Francis is designing it from the way the family travels. You take the kids with you. You don't travel by yourself or go away. You want multiple generations to come and spend time together. We've hosted, people will buy out this place, and we'll host 60th, 70th, 80th birthdays and anniversary things for the family.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to get at and to drill into. This is not just follow a quirky director around the world. That's not the brand element here.
No.
The brand element is family.
It is.
That ties together all of these different pieces. Tell us about how that concept actually is being enacted in these pieces. How not just that, you know, yes, families go, they taste wines together, they go to resorts together, but the ways in which you communicate that value in your marketing, in the experiences themselves.
Yeah, I mean, let's see if it's here. This is going back to Francis Ford Coppola Winery. So you may wonder where that pool came to be, and part of it was Inglenook has this beautiful fountain out front, and Francis had this idea to rent these little French wooden boats to kids to kind of placate them while their parents were enjoying wine. And so they would push the boat around with a little wooden stick, and eventually what would happen is the kid would try to climb in the fountain. More times than not, it was a drunk adult trying to climb into the fountain. And so somebody from our team would say, this is a fountain, not a pool. And Francis hangs out there, and so he heard it enough times where he thought, oh, maybe there should be a pool at a winery. So when he was looking at properties and sharing his idea to have this pool, I mean, people thought he was bonkers, I will tell you. Like, our legal team was kind of like, oh my goodness, the liability, all of that. Again, you have to hire a ton of lifeguards to make that happen. I mean, just so many different things. But he did not waver. Because
Paramount thought the same thing when he wanted to cast Marlon Brando.
Absolutely. So. And that's the theme that we will keep coming back to. Again, it goes back to his vision. You know, he wants something there for multi-generations to enjoy. I mean, the parents want to bring their kids. Even better, grandparents can come with the parents and the kids. I mean, he wants to see all generations there.
And what are the ways that you're actually, again, the value is important and it's there, but marketing has to communicate and has to take, and we got a lot of brands out here, a lot of them have values or are trying to anchor their product in values. And the question becomes, how do we really communicate that to consumers so they feel it, appreciate it, it's embedded in the product?
Well, it is kind of easy for us because it is there. You know, we market, we have a big local following that they know when we release the pool line in April. They want to pick their dates because they want to get the best dates when their kids are out of school. We have family-centric events on property. So two of my favorites, we have an Easter carnival and a harvest carnival every year. And what we do is we charge a fee per child that comes. I think we're at like $12 now, but that then gets donated to a charity, and Francis chooses a different charity with each event. So that becomes a big draw locally for our fans. The restaurant is very family-friendly, and on Tuesday nights, the staff turns into a cast of characters from a dysfunctional Italian family, and there's impromptu singing and lots of improv and things like that. So it's just this idea that we're not... First and foremost, we do have amazing wines, hands down, but we're very careful in not being too pretentious about it. We want to be, you know, inclusive, and we want people to come and enjoy it. We want people to feel comfortable bringing in their kids, and so we're able to talk about that because that's what we do. So it's kind of easy for us to do that.
Well, but you're also doing things like, for instance, the way you tie product to story. And again, going back to that key creative inspiration of this director and his storytelling, but the products are tied to stories, and you do that in very explicit ways. Like here, we get quotes from Coppola himself around things. And tell us a little bit, there are actual products that have specific stories attached to them, right?
Yeah, there are. So here's a slide that just depicts some of the things going on in San Francisco particularly. There's Cafe Zoetrope, Zoetrope All Story, that literary magazine, and then Francis's film company, American Zoetrope. So going back to the storytelling, this wine on the right, Director's Cut, the imagery that you see there is from a personal zoetrope collection that Francis has. Does people know what a zoetrope is? It's like that, it looks like a spinning kind of wheel, but it has slits in it, and then there's usually a strip of something in there. So as you're looking through the holes, it looks like it's animated. And Francis has this collection of it, and so he wanted to make a wine based on that. But he wanted the label to wrap around the bottle. So it's easy to take this for granted because it's on a slide, but this was it was difficult.
So gives a new definition of spin the bottle.
No, yeah, exactly, that too. Yeah, so
sorry.
for the art team to figure out to design, what kind of paper can we print this on that's going to hold itself up well once it wraps around the bottle, and our VP of winery operations trying to figure out how to reconfigure the bottling line to make this happen. It kind of throws a wrench in things, but as we'll keep coming back to, that was the vision. Right. And then it became successful, and so people are like, oh, we need more images for director's cut, and Francis is like, you only can have 4 or 5 because that's all I have in my collection. And it was suggested, well, we could design a different, well, no, it's not from the collection. It doesn't fit. We're not going to make something
And
else.
again, and that brings us to the theme of authenticity, right? Tell us about that piece, about how you're making that persistent sense of authenticity to all of these pieces so that they don't feel put on, but they actually feel like they're coming out of a very genuine and even very specific experience.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're pretty good about sharing that story. Everybody that works at the family Coppola, they understand there's a reason for everything, and so they are very hungry to learn these reasons. So whether people are working in the tasting room or those folks in the bottling line that have to stop production to switch over to make this happen, everybody knows why. And so we just charge through and we do it. And then people are really good about sharing that information with customers that come and visit us in the winery, or somebody's at the restaurant and they want to know, why there's certain dishes on the menu and certain dishes that we don't do. Everyone knows it's because Francis designed that menu. It's very personal.
And I mean, I'm jumping into a final example because we have to go to questions. But I wanted to. But I mean, he asked them to put wine in a can.
Yes.
And named it after his daughter.
Yeah. I'm going to skip ahead here a little bit. But let me linger on. So these are. Do you see Coppola visibly on these bottles anywhere? Can you find it? Because, again, it goes back to Francis's storytelling. His family has this kind of obsession with science. Archimedes was a Greek mathematician, and Francis's grandfather, who grew up in Bernaldo, where Palazzo Margherita is, he decided to name his first son after Archimedes. And then he also had memories of playing at these ruins where there used to be a school by Pythagoras, and Italian. And so Francis made these wines in homage to these people that he remembered hearing about during his childhood. And then that love of science creeped over into great woman spirit. So Ada Lovelace, the first computer programmer, gay Ada, witch of Agnesi, who developed this mathematical theorem, and then through a misfortunate translation, she became known as the witch of Agnesi. That wasn't what her original name was. And this is our newest winery up in the Willamette Valley in Oregon that we just announced today. It's Domaine de Broye. And when Francis came to us saying, we said, okay, we have this property we want to develop, what do you want to name it? And he came back with this, and the first question is, how do we pronounce this? So we agreed on Domaine de Broye. And again, why? And if you see the products that I just shown, Francis does have this appreciation for the sciences. He's heard that his entire life through his ancestors, and Louis de Broglie was a French physicist, and he won a Nobel Prize for some of his work. And Francis often says that he wanted to be a scientist when he was growing up as a kid. That was one of the directions that he wanted to go. So when it came time to name this property, that's where he went. And again, it's not like typical wine marketing. Let's name this after.
It's exactly the opposite of everything that marketing has been talking about for the last decade, which is follow the consumer, let the consumer tell you where to go. And this is exactly the opposite.
Yes, it is.
This is a singular creative imagination bringing the consumer in places they didn't even know they wanted to go.
You put it perfectly.
They don't, but nobody else in this room has a Francis Ford Coppola. But he's imparted, I know that in conversations and as the lead inspiration for all this, he's imparted some principles to you as a marketer, from a director's perspective to a marketer. What are some of the key things that you've gotten from him that informs the building of this brand?
Yeah, it's about the idea and making the idea happen. Yes, you can inform him of the challenges that you're going to have, but that shouldn't necessarily stop you. You mentioned a Sophia Mini, so that's the second product from the right over there. And back in the early 2000s, Francis had approached our winemaking team and said, I want to put wine in a can. He had Sophia Blanc de Blanc wine in a bottle for several years, and he had this idea he wanted to put it in a can. And the winemakers talked about it, and the head winemaker turned to the assistant winemaker and said, you need to explain to Francis why we can't do this. So the assistant winemaker...
No, you do it.
Exactly. So he drafts up an email with very legit reasons and pain points why this would be an issue. And he got one sentence back from Francis, and it said, don't be the roadblock to creativity. And our assistant winemaker was Corey Beck, and he learned that lesson right away, and he's actually now our CEO. So that's one of the key things in everything that we do, whether it's the type of packaging he wants to put on a wine, or a type of event that he wants to put on, or naming something Domaine de Broglie. I mean, this is the direction that we're going in. This is the story that we're going to tell. This is what the costumes are going to look like. These are what the players are going to do. This is what the experience is going to be like. I mean, that's everything.
And I think a good place to end is where we're not going to go. We're not going to see a Godfather theme park with Fredo boat rides. No.
Not my lifetime.
But why? Why not?
Yeah, I mean, because I've talked a lot about Francis, but it's not just about him. This is a family brand. The children are invested in the brand. Roman himself is getting very involved in the direct-to-consumer business, which has been really exciting. Sophia, she works very closely on what the branding for her products look like. I mean, she even decided which outfit she wanted to go with to manage the Instagram page for that particular brand. They don't do it through the normal channel the winery does, because she wanted to manage that imagery. And I think for Francis, in the beginning, it might have been about protecting his own name, but he's trying to leave a legacy for future generations. And so he knows that he has a responsibility to protect the namesake for his ancestors and then for the future generation. And I think in one of the stories that I've heard him tell again and again, I don't know if he remembers that he's told me this before, or if it just comes up. So he befriended Fred Astaire when they were filming Finian's Rainbow.
Finian's Rainbow.
And Fred Astaire was telling him the story about one of his biggest regrets, and it was that at some point he was approached to license his name for a chain of dance studios, and he had originally agreed. And what he then realized was he just kind of looked like he was putting his trademark on something that he didn't actually believe in, because he says, now they're teaching dances that I never did, salsa, rumba, all of this stuff, and he goes, and my name's on it, so it looks like I'm endorsing it, and I know nothing about those. I'm not an expert in that field. And so Francis keeps that in mind. So even though we're his company, when we go to him to ask him to put a name on something, I mean, we have to ask him permission every single time. So even internally, he's protecting his name. And I can say it's not easy, but I respect it, and I totally understand it, and it makes it easy for us to know what we can and can't do.
I think there's really interesting connections between this story and the ways in which direct-to-consumer brands are trying to build more authentic stories for themselves and their brands, and a lot of lessons. Thank you very much for bringing this to us. We have time for a few questions. You have a few questions of Janelle? Andrew.
Thank you. What does scale look like for you? I mean, you don't want to be on every wine shelf. You don't want to be in every, necessarily, right? How big is your best target audience?
Yeah, so for me in direct-to-consumer, it's very segmented, right? So it's easy for me to kind of answer that question. I think for us is, I know we want to scale more than where we're at, but we can't do it just on our current model alone. So I mentioned that the winery is a great place to recruit new members, and there are great wineries popping up all over the country. You do not have to go to Napa and Sonoma to have a great wine experience anymore, which I think is actually a good thing. But how can I scale my wine club if what we've been focused on so much are the perks that you can get in booking the pool early, or getting a discount when you come to the winery, or coming to different events and things like that? So how do we bring that experience out to people? So I don't know the answer to what that scale looks like, but I know it can be more than where we're at. That being said, there's a air of exclusivity when you belong to a club, right? So for us, the important thing is, again, as I mentioned earlier, I don't necessarily expect our members to buy diamond wines directly from us necessarily, and I'm okay with that. So for us, is finding, when can we create certain brands or labels just for them, or that are harder to find for them. And so, and that's also a dance, because production is doing a lot of different things at the time. So when I come to them and say, I want to do X amount of cases of this wine, it's got to be pretty legit and for a good reason. So yeah, we're still answering that question ourselves. There's a lot of variables when it comes to scale. Yeah.
Janine, thanks very much.
Thank you.
We're going to round out the morning by extending a conversation that we've already started having about the relationship between direct-to-consumer brands and agencies and outside providers. As all of you are starting to move to greater scale, as you start moving towards new customer acquisition models, that requires greater partnerships and banding with agencies especially, but also vendors and data providers. To take the lead on this panel, we have Rich Zeldes, who's the Executive Vice President and Managing Director at the agency Stella Rising. Are we ready for Rich in our panel?
This is obviously a really important topic, talking about building staffs in-house for DTC brands, as well as looking at outside agencies. So to start, I thought that each of our panelists could introduce themselves, what they do for each of the companies that they're with, how long they've been there, and just give a quick introduction.
Hi, everyone. So I'm JD. I head up brand for Curology. So a little bit about Curology, in case you haven't heard of us. We are a custom skincare company based out of San Francisco. So the hero product is a custom prescription cream, and it addresses skin concerns ranging from acne to anti-aging. A little bit about how it works. You sign up, there's a free trial, you answer a skin quiz, and snap a few selfies. And then on the other side, a dermatology provider will kind of write up a prescription, and we send your custom product on your way, and it's a subscription model as well. So a little context on kind of where we are today. Anything that is non-performance based falls under brand, and we really didn't focus too much on brand until 8 months ago, with me joining to lead up all the efforts.
Hello, I'm Lori Gatto. I'm the VP of Marketing at Tomboy X. I joined Tomboy X about 7 months ago. If you haven't heard of us, we're based in Seattle. We are gender-neutral underwear. We're our hero product, our boy shorts. We sell a lot of underwear, bras, but we've kind of come at it from more of a human agenda model where we fit all sizes from extra small up to 4X. Really kind of that gender neutrality story where, we fit every body. We, of course, have comfortable underwear. A lot of companies are out there selling comfortable underwear, but ours has kind of been really kind of from the DNA that we fit who you are, because fitting in was never the point. So with that being said, we're seeing strong growth. We've been around since about 2014. I joined the company to really kind of elevate some of the marketing that we've been doing. So unlike JD, our marketing team is me overseeing site, creative. So we're a small team doing a lot, but it's been exciting. So glad to be here.
Great, thanks. Hi, everybody. My name is Jennifer Muse. I work for General Mills. Obviously, we're all familiar with General Mills. We've grown up with the General Mills family of brands, starting from when you're very, very young as a kid, eating Cheerios out of the Ziploc bag. all the way through Pillsbury, Betty Crocker. Where the company is today and why I actually work for them is last May, we established a new e-commerce division. We're a very lean team of 10. It's very interesting because you think of like e-commerce new. General Mills is finally getting on the bandwagon that they need to evolve e-commerce and define what that is. And for me, in my role as the leader of CRM, it's really about, okay, so the analytics and things that we've done so far have been really just sales driven. So now it's about, let's really focus on what is the consumer journey for each of these brands, and then not only that, but how can we evolve and have more cohesion between the General Mills family of brands. It's very challenging, obviously, because we have several hundred brands, and they each have their own brand teams. So my goal and my role and our group's role is to really try to work with the brands to understand what their consumer journey is, and then again, work to do that within the family. So that's what I do.
Excellent. So to jump right in, when it comes to formulating a staff in-house, for marketing, for media, for creative, where do you see the importance of building internally, and how have you done it here at your current company, or potentially even at companies you've been with in the past? Want to start, JD? Everyone can discuss.
Sure. So like many D2C brands, we focused primarily on scaling. So marketing, the way that we've built up to team was really, we just had 2 marketers do all of our media buying and optimization in-house, took a lot of those learnings and kind of scaled it cross-functionally onto all the different channels and such. So we are more biased in bringing everything in-house. We believe that naturally you have an advantage of, the direct consumer relations and building that journey. So we've kind of approached like the performance size as such. We also built an in-house creative team to support, a lot of like supporting all like the asset creation side of it, and we've really been able to leverage that on the brand side as well. So again, the process hasn't been linear. From times when we didn't have our core competency, we did bring in agencies on a project basis to really learn about kind of like what kind of talent do we need, what kind of processes do we need. So at any given time, we're always constantly assessing like the cost benefit of bringing it in-house to outside, like outsourcing. So it's a fluid process. It's been that way for us.
Excellent. Do you want to add to that, Lori, potentially?
Yeah, so I've had the pleasure of coming to a very small direct-to-consumer company, coming from a company, Blue Nile, prior to this, where we were a much more established, larger company. We'd been around for 20 years. So I have had a different stance coming to a company of the size I'm at right now versus where I had been before. I, too, was kind of in the mindset of building that internal expertise in-house, building that knowledge base, really kind of playing on that operational excellence. But coming to a Tomboy X, where we are smaller, where we are seeing tremendous growth, we have had to rely more on agencies to help scale, especially on the performance side. Like a lot of companies out here, we've relied a lot on our scale from social and search. And as the company's growing, we've been working with an agency out of Seattle that's allowed us to scale. This agency has been able to bring some of the creative help that we need, because in social you've got to be changing your creative out quite frequently, and then on the media side. If we would have originally brought in those roles, especially in Seattle, I'm sure we're not the only market, those roles, finding the experience can be quite expensive, and then finding the creative resources. So the agency has allowed us to scale and grow, and as we've gotten larger, we're now looking to start to build some of that expertise in-house. But that kind of starts with recruiting and finding good talent, and we're in a market where it's very difficult to find those type of talent, but that's kind of the next wave, is to bring that in. But I would say on the creative side, which is a different lens, when the company originally started, our founders did actually enlist the help on a project basis, brand help, to really establish the brand and bring in some of that expertise, and really kind of lay down the foundation of where we can build the brand on. But since then, we have built a lot of that expertise from, an art director to some designers. We just hired a content manager, where I really feel that, because being a brand that's really kind of leading with brand first, having that internal brand voice and building that so we can, continue to build that out all across all the channels is important. So that has been kind of the first layer of really building that voice in-house, and then how do we kind of scale, with different platforms where, some technology partners and some agency partners are going to continue to be, in our near future. So it's kind of balancing that out.
Great. And Jennifer?
Yes, so I would say my situation is obviously very different because I work for a food company, and we have all the brands, as I mentioned, as you know. So in-house solutions, I should start by saying it really does vary brand to brand in terms of what we use or build in-house versus what is outsourced, and what technology companies that we do lean on. A lot of our more established brands definitely have built the solutions in-house, similar to what Lori was saying, just for efficiencies, and also General Mills is obviously very storied, and they like to have full control, especially from a brand perspective. Each of the brands have creative in-house. They really want to own that voice and own how we are communicating with our consumers across every channel, be it online, be it offline, be it social, being packaging, which is obviously very important, product innovation. In terms of outsourcing out of house, or externally rather, especially with the newer brands that we've acquired, such as Blue Buffalo, which for those of you who are not familiar, it's a higher end dog and cat food business, so still fits within food, but we thought, let's build it out and let's expand to the family by bringing this brand into the fold. So they actually have brought with them Salesforce, so they have a relationship there. As I started with my team, I've worked very extensively with Salesforce in the past and really believe in what the technology can do. Shout out again to Salesforce team here. And especially from a CRM perspective. So we do, some of the other brands do have some CRM, not a lot, but I very strongly feel that we really need an agency like Salesforce that can really bring the cohesion across channels, so and also the analytics. So building out the customer journeys, as I started this conversation with, I personally don't think that we have the capabilities or the resources in-house, because it becomes a fight of like, okay, who takes priority? Do we want to build this for Cheerios? Well, Cheerios is one of our biggest brands, so if they have an ask, they're always going to have that prioritization in terms of getting work done, and so that is a detriment to some of the other smaller brands where it's like, well, you're like a fraction of what General Mills' revenue is. So I guess my answer would be that we do in-house. I think it's right to have brand control, but externally, I do think that to evolve from a CRM perspective, we are going to need to lean on some partnership.
Great. And can you shed some light on at what point in the life stage of a brand, either size or how many months or years it's been around, where you might look at spending more in-house to hire talent versus external agencies? Is there any correlation from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I'll answer that because I have come from a company that was much more established to a younger company where our revenues are much smaller. So I think size can be a factor. Early on when Tomboy X started, as I mentioned earlier, not to repeat myself, but to hire the expertise and the salaries associated with handling, let's say, paid social or Surge or some of our other advertising programs would have been a lot for a company of Tomboy X's size early on. On top of that, you need a technology, bidding platform as well. And so, we work with an engine that's, we pay a % of media spend, so it has allowed us to have some months where, being in startup mode where your budgets may not be as big as, future months, working with an agency in that model has allowed us to scale. But as we've gotten bigger and the company is growing, we're now at the point where we can start to bring in that talent, afford that talent, and build in, kind of that operational excellence inside. Coming into Tomboy X2, we lacked technology, analytics help, and part of the last 6 months has really kind of been building out those tools. But prior to this, I was at Blue Nile, and I came in, and the company had been around 20 years. Everything was managed in-house. We'd built our own attribution tool, and having it in-house actually in that worked well for us. So.
That's great. And I was going to ask a little bit about analytics attribution because just in speaking with different brands from my own perspective, it seems as if as it gets way more complicated in that space, there are a number of brands that are doing it in-house, but is that an area that outside agencies can provide specific support? In what way have you experienced that or are looking at it from your perspective?
I can take that one. So we actually have a blend. So the challenge with food also is that you do your marketing and then we're pushing to stores, be it online or offline, and so the analytics part becomes very challenging. We rely a lot on Nielsen, on their data, and then also obviously the different channels and the different grocery stores or grocery outlets, Amazon again, we rely on their analytics as well. On my team, as I mentioned, that was newly formed, we have 2 analysts that were pulled in because it is really complex to tie together the consumer data and how effective or efficient each of our marketing channels are to actually driving sales and where we can build that out. As I mentioned before, Salesforce, I think that's a great strength as well because we'll be able to see as we start to implement more robust CRM initiatives, how effective those channels are and how at each of the levels of the touch points, how the consumer one-to-one is responding. Like, do they want to hear from you through email or are they more on social channels and things like that? So I think that it requires, at least from my perspective and my company, a blend of in-house expertise as well as outsourcing for the more robust data analytics.
Yeah, I want to add a little bit to what you had mentioned about the stages. I think that in terms of a company's life cycle, the most critical periods are usually around the startup as well as the growth phase. I think the way that we think about it is we balance input and output. So it's kind of like that delicate dance of, how quickly are you scaling and are you able to accommodate those business needs? For us, it's thinking about the opportunity cost and if we're able to be efficient in, growing that business in-house versus outsourcing. To Lori's point about hiring for talent, to find that right person with the expertise and in the vertical, and all comes with obviously a really high price tag. A little kind of off topic, a little tangent on how we handle and how think about recruiting is we take pride in actually talking about how we've built the entire company almost based off of summer interns. And the way that we think about recruiting is we're looking for people who are relentless in problem solving, and we believe that a lot of the tenacity with how they think through problems are transferable. So a lot of times we hire for potential, and when I talk about hiring interns, and what ends up happening is our success rate has been around 70% converting interns into full-time roles that, they might not have any idea what they're working on, but it's the ramping up of it and it's their propensity to want to learn. And that has allowed us to scale a lot of different avenues.
Yeah, I think what's neat about that, and I think a lot of us have probably felt that, is they learn your brand first, so you can really teach them about your specific brand, learning the competition versus coming from somewhere else. So I think that's a huge advantage. Appreciate you shedding light on that. And then for the panel, so when it comes to specific roles, when it comes to social, search, programmatic digital display, traditional media, et cetera, are there specific ways in which agencies have been successful, or you're open to looking at agencies, or where it really makes the most sense to focus on in-house hires? Anyone want to grab that one?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends. So like right now, we're stable in what we've got running on social and search, but we want to scale up into some other areas. So as a startup, we're getting some funding coming in, so it's like, okay, now we've got to hit the ground, we've got some money to spend. And as we build on top of where we're at, in tandem, I am looking for people, but I am also looking to bring in some technology solutions, some more strategic partners to kind of help us lay the foundation and build some learnings. But I think there are times where you need to pulse it in, where you might just not have the resources or the technology structure, or we're pretty rudimentary where I'm at right now, so I'm going to have to bring some of that in. And even at Blue Nile, as we were expanding some of our channels and looking at different technology stacks, it was looking externally where we knew we would never be able to get to market fast enough to start implementing. But
anything to add, Jennifer? Where you?
Yeah, I think I've touched on it a little bit. It's a huge challenge for a lot of our brands because they're so thin on internal resources. And I'll give an example. So Blue Buffalo, as I mentioned, they have so much that they want to do. Their social team consists of one gal. And so she can obviously clearly only do so much. And so there's so much more that they want to do, especially with generating content and being sort of not just like, hey, we've got this pet food, but being like, we know the challenges of having a dog or a cat and like at different life stages, and maybe they get older, they get more mature, they have health issues. So trying to be not just like, hey, here's food and here's why you should pay like 10x what you would pay if you bought just Purina and a mass market brand. So really trying to evolve that. I think that I'm trying to, and my team, we're trying to make the case for why it is important to be best in class, and we can't do everything ourselves. So we definitely do need to rely on tech companies to, basically offset our shortcomings.
Anything, JD, from a brand perspective specifically? Because I know it's a little bit different from your role versus more of the performance side.
Yeah, so how we lay out kind of the strategy for the rest of the year is getting really tactical here, but we kind of lay out the key pillars, what we want to focus our time on, and then we do all the weighted averages and everything, get all the stakeholders, and then we kind of come up with that list of what we deem we want, like our top priorities that we are more likely to handle in-house. And then when it comes to more of like the tactical execution, right? Like for example, on brand side, do we want to be doing the pitches for PR? Probably not. That's when we would work with an agency. So it's, just figuring out, again, like priorities. Where is your time best spent? And then going that way.
That's great. So is there an optimal mix, or is there a holy grail in figuring out, how outside agencies and internal staff can work together? I know, like for example, from a social perspective, it's so complex these days. Influencer marketing's a part of that. The community's so important. On the other hand, tools, technology, data are so important, and that goes even for search and other areas of brand building and also performance. Anything that you can mention in terms of examples of how the teams have worked together, internal and agency partners?
I can take that. I mean, because I've kind of in that environment right now, and I don't know if there is what I would call the perfect blend, because I think every company's different. Your staffing needs are different. Your internal talent's different. But the one thing we've really tried to, I think in one of the earlier, it talked about breaking down the silos, and that is so important. And that means communication across even our agency partners. Our agency partners, as I mentioned, on some of the performance side, are very tied in with, for example, our email CRM manager, because we're building lists, we're sharing some of the learnings that we're learning on our email side with our external agency, and so making sure that when you are working with partners, they're integrated and part of your planning process. They're part of your overall company goals. And I think that was one of the things that worked the best, is that let's make sure, because when I started, they were marching to a different goal than we were looking at internally. And so bringing in that kind of united, KPIs and what they're tracking to, and making sure they've got, the holistic view into what's happening inside the company. But to me, it's been, if you are working partners, they are your business partners. They're just not a vendor. Like, get them in your office, make sure they're part of your weekly calls, making sure they're getting exposure, to other stakeholders inside the company can work really well.
Thank you. And just to finish up on that, from your perspective, is it more specific agencies for a specific task, or is it more beneficial for agencies to have multiple tasks to be able to work with your internal teams? Is that something that you've looked at, either again here or other companies you might have been at?
I mean, for me, just to make sure I'm answering the question, is that I get pitched by agencies all the time, and a lot of them say they do everything, and that usually just turns me off, because it's like, you can't be the best at everything. So I have gone to work with partners that are very strong and have expertise in certain disciplines, because if I wanted to kind of, and not to say this is the case, but I could build a mediocre team, but if I really want to get that expertise and the best, if it's through our post-purchase or, our email provider or our influencer or some podcasts, like, I want to find expertise. So I do think kind of the agency model where you've got more of that boutique and specialization has worked better for me.
I completely agree with that. And I think, for example, a lot of our brands don't even have loyalty programs, and that's something that I really believe in, first of all. And secondly, I think you really do need to work with a partner that's all they do. And so they get like the whole evolution of how you launch a program and what you need to think through, and the reward structure of that, and how you're communicating with the audience. So I definitely believe that it does depend on the competencies that you're looking for. And I also agree that I don't think there's a one-stop shop. So.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. Questions and answers. Steve, I think we're up to that.
Yeah. We have time for questions?
Hi, thank you so much for a great panel. I think it's very interesting. I had a question to JD about Curology. I think it's a great product. I never tried it myself, but I heard a lot about it. I'm just wondering, you have the dermatologist on the other end, right, who answers all the questions. Do you guys have them in-house? So how do you source the doctors' technical opinions to answer all the questions of the consumers, which can have like millions of issues with the skin, or I don't know, they can have like, after they use the product, they would have some, I don't know, skin would go worse, and would it be the same dermatologist, or do you have them in-house, or source them? How do you manage that? Thank you.
Yeah, really good question. The easy one is, yes, they are in-house. We're based in San Francisco, but we also have a separate office in San Diego. We're growing so quickly, so just an interesting fact, we've basically hired like all of the people that we would want to hire in that market. So we're bringing on other medical providers from neighboring areas. And in terms of how to handle the communication, we really take pride in the personalization and the one-to-one connection, but we are exploring technology options. The engineering team is much better, the product team is much better at kind of distilling all the details, but that is not something that we would lean kind of like completely to on the tech side, because one of the key point of difference is kind of that we're not AI, and so it's pretty core to what we would definitely not want to lose.
Good morning, Dan Kidd with Data Wallet. I had a question for the panel. There's a varying backgrounds and different sizes of companies and stuff. How does innovation and technology versus commodity product fit into the spectrum of whether you outsource or try to tackle new innovation internally?
I'll try to take that one. So, I mean, I think from being at a small company and where we are brand led, innovation's actually been a little bit easier sometimes at a smaller company because you don't have to break down as many barriers or go through a lot of hoops. And so innovation from us has kind of come from, how do we tell our story? How do we talk about our product? How do we create a unique experience, which is things we're working on right now. To me, the innovation can really kind of then stems from bringing some of those people in-house because they're passionate about the brand. And I would say a brand like Tomboy X, our team is very passionate that work with us because they want to be there, they believe in the product, they believe in the vision. So innovation from us has kind of been like, how do we tell a unique story and be more brand-led? And, then people will come and, they believe in you so much that they'll want to buy the product. So not sure if that's answering your question, but I kind of look at it more from where we're kind of developing our content and storytelling.
One last quick question. So Nolan Simons, Adobe Ad Cloud TV. I'm also based in San Francisco. I just have a quick question. What role do you guys see video taking in 2019? Because it is so trackable. You can use so much data for targeting and measurements. I'm just curious what your thoughts are on video.
A lot of our brands do have a huge appetite for video. And again, I think in the CPG industry, it's kind of a different environment because, again, they're so focused on driving sales. But I'm really passionate and trying to infuse into the different brands that you need to have that play to build that relationship with the customer. Video is so huge because, and I'll give an example with Annie's. So I work actually out of the Annie's Naturals office in Berkeley, which is mac and cheese and a bunch of different snacks and things. Their customers are so loyal and so passionate, but they have a lot of dietary products and that are very specific. So to me, it's very much a lifestyle brand, right? So it's those people that are we call them kid balancers, and so it's parents that they want to give their kids healthy snacks or healthy food, but they also want their kids to eat it, so it's like video and clearly. So video, I think, is hugely important because you can tell the story and it's about that lifestyle, maybe showing kids playing in the park and they've got their little Annie's gummies in their backpack and things like that. So I think video is hugely important.
Yeah, video is huge for us too. Just to give a sense of where we're investing dollars into creative, we started off with 2 video interns, and now we just have a fully fleshed out video team. We're bringing on even sound people. We're no longer paying just for music. We want our own because the creative team feels strongly about it. And kind of when we think about ROI, we see it and again, there's just more and more needs. I think for us, it's more about how do you balance the business needs and also keep the creatives happy. And that's kind of when it goes down to your content strategy, right? Buckets of, this is what will keep the lights on. Please keep doing it. And then you reserve 5 to 10% where they go wild. And that's kind of also what would propel the brand forward. So yeah, it's huge. And everyone's having a lot of fun with that, so yeah.
Hi, thank you so much, Jason Daly from Facebook. Lori, you talked about percentage fee compensation models. I'm curious if anyone on the panel has explored other kind of compensation models with outside partners, pay for performance, subscription models, anything like that.
I mean, I have in my past. I've seen all kinds of different models. I would say the percent of media has been probably the most common as lately, or a retainer, depending on the kind of company. I mean, we obviously have a lot of PR and our SEO are on retainer, but on kind of the performance, I mean, the rev share I've seen done in the past, but I would say most of the time lately it's been kind of on the media.
Hi, I'm Haley from Kenshu. I was just wondering if Amazon was a channel that you guys were growing or going into.
I'll say yes. I can't really talk about it, but yes.
And I would say we're starting to evaluate.
Maybe.
And I'll just say that working with a number of brands, emerging what we call rising star brands, there's a huge appetite for figuring out DTC strategies on their own site in addition to a strategy with Amazon. So yeah, it's a hot topic for sure.
And we're going to move this into a roundtable discussion in about 2 minutes. Rich and panel, thanks very much.
Thanks.
So I think we may have some activity. John, do we have any announcements about activities?
Yeah, a couple of quick announcements here. So, so if you're going either on the brewery tour or the axe throwing, God, that's so weird to say those two things in one sentence. It's like head and cheese. They should never be in the same sentence. Head and cheese. It should not be. Head cheese. You know, you've heard of that. What was I saying? Yes, the axe throwing and the brewery tour. We're going to leave at 2 o'clock from downstairs in the lobby. We have shuttle service to take you there and back. So be on time. We'll leave promptly at 2 o'clock. Then for those of you who have the one-on-one meetings, it's just a few of you. We'll be back in this room at 5:30. You know who you are. And the afternoon activities will return you back here in time for that. Tonight, we have cocktails, 6:30. And dinner, they're both at the same location. We've bought out a restaurant here locally, just 2 blocks away, Italic. It's an Austin staple. It's a great spot, and it's very close by. So we'll congregate downstairs at about 6:15, and about 6:30 we'll walk over. It's just 2 blocks away. Cocktails sponsored by our friends at Maverick. That begins at around 6:30, or when we arrive. And then dinner thereafter from our folks, friends over at Cheetah Digital, are sponsoring dinner tonight, and that'll happen after cocktails, 7:30 or so. You're welcome to bring a friend, a significant other if you like. You'll just need to pay the cost, which is our cost for the cocktails and dinner, and you may arrange that with Julie out front, so just let her know if you want to bring a friend. We can certainly accommodate that. Where are your badges? You need to have your badges on at all times for cocktails and dinner. Otherwise, we won't know that you're with our group, and you won't be able to get all the free food and stuff. Okay, is that all I have?
Were we going to do billiards as well?
Oh, no? Well, we actually do. For those of you who didn't make it onto one of the 2 activities, maybe you've got some work to do, but you want to do something still this afternoon.